Hi, welcome to Canfield Company. I'm your host, Rob Canfield. In the Studio B control room, we've got the director, Frank Martin. And my special guest today is Beth Genly. Thanks for being on the show today, Beth. I appreciate you coming along.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Beth is going to be talking today about a subject known to some, maybe most people, and it's called burnout. Before we talk about that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Beth. She got her graduate education at Yale University, and then she cared for women and families for 2 decades as a certified nurse midwife. And she also taught future nurse midwives at both Yale New Haven Hospital and Oregon Health Sciences University. And after escaping from her own burnout, Beth founded Burnout Solutions, and this is where she offers public speaking and consulting services. And she helps people to survive and thrive using unique research-based anti-burnout strategy she developed with Dr. Marnie Lewis, ND. And she's pleased to report they're going to have a book coming out fairly soon.
I'm excited, yeah.
And we're looking forward to that book. It's called Saving Yourself from Burnout, Jumpstarting Your Fading Energy and Productivity, Get Your Life Back. Now that jumped out at me when we talked about coming on the show. That just excited me that you can help people who have suffered from burnout. Mm-hmm. And she lives in Oregon. She's an Oregonian, and she's married to a software engineer, and they have 2 grown children. So thanks for coming on the show.
I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Robert.
So let's cut to the chase. What the heck is burnout?
Burnout is a state of misery, really. It has 3 dimensions, they say, and these have all been proven by research. The first one is emotional exhaustion, when people just wear you out. It's also physical and mental exhaustion, so exhaustion's maybe a better term for it. The second dimension is depersonalization, is the medical term for it, but it's disconnection and cynicism, probably irritability too. And the third dimension is this sense that you can't make a difference, or you can't make a difference anymore. And this happens to people who are extremely competent and extremely good at what they do, and maybe are still making a difference, but it stops being meaningful. It stops having meaning. It stops having purpose for them. And the combination of those feelings is pretty devastating. And there's a lot of myths about it too, which make it even worse.
What does that look like physically? What physical symptoms could someone have if they're suffering from burnout?
Anything that you can think of that's related to stress, to bad stress, but kind of taken to a worse degree. People who are burned out often have trouble sleeping even though they're exhausted. They are very prone to injury and illness. Their immune system is down. They may be prone to crying at odd moments. My co-author, Dr. Loomis, said that one of her warning signs that she was really getting over the line into burnout was weeping on the way to work. This happened to me too. I'd cry on the way to work, and then I'd just sit in the parking lot and kind of clean up so I could go to work. Yeah, it's challenging.
I have to admit, back in the day, I did suffer from that.
It's very common.
Could not sleep even though I was exhausted. Just figuring that I didn't make a difference. What am I even doing? It's all for naught, even though I'm working my butt off.
Yes, exactly.
And it came to the point where I went to work in tears, and I called my wife. I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, can you get your butt to the doctor? Just go over there. Can you go that far? So what you mentioned in your intro that you also suffer from burnout.
Yes.
What was it like for you when?
Well, I was a nurse midwife, as I said. I absolutely adored being a nurse midwife. Delivering a baby or helping a woman deliver a baby is a tremendous high. And I got to the point where I had really forgotten why I was doing it. I was so tired. Of course, the hours when you're a midwife are challenging. And I was starting to hide out. I was also teaching, so I usually had a student nurse midwife with me, and I would hide in our on-call office and play free cell, play solitaire. And they'd knock on the door to come and report about a patient, and I'd turn the free cell off and paste a smile on my face and look interested and look excited and go out and assess the patient or do whatever I needed to do and come back and just fade away again. And it was so painful to not love something that I loved so much. I felt like there was something deeply wrong with me that I had broken somehow, and I didn't know what it was. I thought I was a wimp. I thought I had a character flaw. I thought that I just wasn't tough enough. Of course, it took 2 decades to get into this situation, but I still felt like maybe I'm just not tough enough.
Sure.
And since then, I've learned it's a process that happens unless you have the right skills. So now I teach that. So,
is there any profession or personality type that's at risk for this, or is anyone susceptible?
You know, when they first started doing research on burnout about 4 decades ago, they looked at the helping professions. So they looked at nurses and doctors and social workers and teachers, and lo and behold, there's a lot of burnout in those professions. It's 60, 70, 80% sometimes in some areas. Social workers, way up there, and even the people working for them, like the front desk people in medicine, tend to be more burned out. But when they branched out, there's been studies now on mining safety engineers, grocery baggers, banking executives, mid-level hotel managers. It's basically, if they look at a profession of people who work very hard, who are very dedicated, who tend to work long hours in a profession with a lot of changes and demands on them, they find burnout. It's pretty ubiquitous. Things that can put you more at risk are if you are an introverted person, which I am. I really love doing this kind of thing, but then I need to go home and have some quiet time.
Me too.
After. Yeah,
Me too.
So introversion puts you a little more at risk. Something called being prevention focused, which means that you, which I also am, that you are more concerned with making sure everything goes right than you are with making sure you win. So that you really want to not have errors, you really want to not have accidents. And the other thing is just being a type A person seems to do it also.
Result-oriented, overdrive.
Yes. One other piece that really surprised me, if you have a powerful backstory that brought you into your profession. For instance, about a year ago, I heard an interview with a teacher on the radio where she said, you know, I'm an immigrant myself, and when I came into this country not speaking English, and there was a teacher there who welcomed me in, spoke my language, and made me feel not like a stranger, that made such a huge difference, and now I want to be that person for all these children that need me, which is such a beautiful story. And all I could think was, oh my dear, you are so at risk for burnout. The research is really clear when you have that kind of powerful backstory that drives you, unless you are able to protect yourself in some other ways, you're more at risk. So, yeah.
We're going to be right back with Beth Genly on burnout right after this. Hi, welcome back to Canfield Company. I'm your host, Rob Canfield. My guest today is Beth Genly. Thanks again for being on the show.
Glad to be here.
And we are talking about burnout. So far we've talked about what it feels like, what some things people might look for, what it looks like. What do companies and organizations know about it? Are they aware of what can happen to their employees or organizations? Do they know what can happen to like their volunteers or employees of what it looks like?
There is more interest in burnout, more awareness of burnout now than there used to be, but there's very little awareness, I think, of what to do about it. So in a lot of places, it's felt that it's kind of an inevitable cost of doing business, that people are going to wear themselves out, that people are going to reach the point where they just can't do it anymore, and they don't really have answers for that. It is really clear that if you treat your employees well, if you have a good corporate culture, if you reward people properly in both financial ways and non-financial ways, you can go a long way toward decreasing burnout. And those interventions have really been shown to help a lot. My concern, I worked in big institutions that are very constrained by outside forces, big hospitals, for instance, and they were interested in making changes that would help their employees, but with budget constraints and other constraints, there was a limit to how much they could do. It just wasn't, it was really clear what needed to happen, but then there was what could happen, right? And that's true in schools, it's true in many, many places. So my partner and I went back through the medical literature looking for what can a person do now, right? Your employer does the best they can to take care of you, or they don't, either way, and still we need to have some way to take care of our own selves. So that's my focus. And to go back to the corporate side of the question again, the organizations, the costs of burnout are huge. A whole lot of turnover, a whole lot of absenteeism, a whole lot of presenteeism, which is when you're at work in your body, but your brain is not. You're just occupying a chair.
And in the medical field, is there a possibility of mistakes?
Oh my goodness. So there's a really interesting study from the Mayo Clinic, which is a big collection of clinics, actually. They looked at almost 8,000 surgeons. And they asked them, have you made a major medical error in the last 3 months? And about 9% of them did, which was about 700 surgeons. So if you can imagine 700 surgeons, now they did not ask them what the error was, and surgeons are extremely meticulous. What was major to them may not be, we hope, major to us, right? But some of them might have been. And they found that those errors were directly tied to burnout, despite the fact that at the Mayo Clinic and many, many other hospitals, they have instituted all kinds of extra checks. For instance, I had surgery on my left wrist about a year ago, and the nurse came in separately, then the surgeon, then the anesthesiologist, and said, where are we doing surgery today? I said, my left wrist. They said, okay. And then the next one came in and asked the same question. And after the third one did, they drew on my arm with a Sharpie, right? So those kinds of things they learned that from the airlines, really, those kinds of triple checks. Even in spite of that, if you end up with emotional exhaustion and depersonalization, you're at more risk for errors. And those errors, it's painful for you as a healthcare provider, but it's certainly a challenge for the patient as well. So there's many studies like that. Yeah.
It's amazing you should mention the airlines, because there were definite problems with burnout there, flying too many hours, not getting enough sleep, and when mistakes happen, like in airlines or in the health profession, you're looking at some severe consequences, not just making a mistake on some spreadsheet somewhere.
Exactly.
You're talking about lives. So we're talking about something that could really affect people's safety if they don't deal with burnout.
I have one other example, if I may.
Sure.
There was a big study done in Finland, and the advantage that they had there is you're assigned a medical number at birth, and all of your medical records follow you throughout your life. So they looked at 10,000 forestry workers. These were both people who were like trimming the trees up high in those cherry pickers, and also first level managers. And they found that for every 1 point increase in burnout, these people were 10% more likely to have a serious accident that year. And by serious, they defined serious accident as they were hospitalized or they died, right? So definitely serious.
Serious, definitely.
If they said that they felt symptoms of burnout at least once a month, their risk of serious accident went up 19%.
That's kind of frightening statistic,
It's really pretty appalling, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah, we're definitely talking people's lives and other people's lives around us. We want to keep our loved ones and the people around us safe as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, after this, we're going to talk about, I bet Beth has some solutions and ways to deal with burnout, and we're going to talk about that right after this. Hi, thanks for coming back to our show, Canfield Company. My guest today is Beth Genly. We're talking about burnout. Now, while we were off camera, you talked about people not wanting even to talk about burnout because of
Stigma.
And malpractice fears. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so burnout, remember that I said I wondered if there was something wrong with me, if I was weak, if there was a character flaw. Those are very common things that people worry about. And since most people have no idea what to do about burnout, they wonder if that might be true, right? None of it is true. Burnout is a process that happens to you because of chronic stress and not having the proper skill set. But in medicine, if you made an error, you're really not supposed to talk about it at all. If you are a pilot, you're really not supposed to talk about it if you make an error because of our litigious climate. People are really restricted from talking, and that makes it even harder and makes you more depersonalized as well. So it's another piece of the puzzle.
So we've talked about a lot of the problems and symptoms and consequences of burnout.
Yes.
But your book talks about what can people do?
What can people do? So as I said, what we went through is we looked at what the individual can do regardless of the working environment, whether it's a good one or not. And we came up with 5 areas from looking at 4 decades of medical literature on burnout, which I wish I had known existed when I was a nurse midwife. It was completely outside my field, and I did not know there was a huge body of research on this. And we looked at what do individuals do that help, and we came up with 5 areas. One is self-care. And in self-care, in each of these 5 areas, we have about 12 skills, but the most important, I think, in self-care is getting enough sleep. When they look at what stresses you and what pushes you over the line into burnout, it's clearly when you're not getting enough sleep, and that includes sleeping 6 hours a night. That's not enough for most people, and you start making errors when you're sleeping 6 hours a night routinely or less. So getting enough sleep is your cardinal self-care skill.
It's like a number one thing to do. Get enough sleep.
Get enough sleep. If you're exhausted, it's much more important than exercise, for instance. You do need exercise, but you're at risk for injury if you're exhausted. So get the rest first.
How much sleep should the average person get?
7 to 9 hours a night, routinely, yes. And naps are great. Naps are really great. We don't take enough naps in this country, so I highly recommend naps.
I'm thinking I like this more and more. Naps are good. Okay.
Naps are good, yes.
So what else can people do?
Okay, so the second area is reflection and recognition, and in that it's the easiest shift to make because it's just a mental, emotional shift. It's not big exercises you have to do or spending more time in bed or any of that, right? It's just a matter of focusing a little more on gratitude and a little more on your own values. For instance, if you spend a few minutes each day, say at the end of the day when you're driving home, thinking about what did I do today that reflected my values, or what happened today that I was a part of that reflected my personal values and moved things forward in a way that I value. People who have those thoughts for a few minutes each day have less burnout than people who don't. And it actually shifts your brain to a healthier part of the brain.
Just by thinking about that.
Just by thinking about that, yeah. So, and you can get more deeply into it with like mindfulness meditation and those kinds of things, but a great place to start is with a values and gratitude focus.
Nice.
So that's part 2.
What else can people do to help with the burnout issue?
So the next thing is what we call capacity. So what's the lay of the land? What's on your plate? We tend to think of ourselves as our work self, which has our work to-do list, and our home self, which has our home to-do list, and maybe our volunteer self, which has our volunteer to-do list.
Right.
And in our heads, those are 3 different people. Somehow, right?
Somehow.
There are 3 different people. So taking a look, making all the lists in one place and really looking and saying, is this realistic for one human being? A lot of us are carrying loads which are not realistic in the long term. In the short term, it works great to push yourself really hard. You get a lot done. In the long term, it'll fry you out.
Absolutely.
So there's many things in structure that your capacity that you can't change, but some you can. So I like to refer to the 3 Ds, which are delay, delegate, and drop. What can you delay, not do right now? What can you delegate? What can you just not do? So.
That's a really important skill for everyone, is to what do I need to do right now and what can wait? Do I really need to do all this stuff now? And usually the answer is, not really. Not
You
really.
know, I
The world will
honestly-
not end. Yeah.
One of the reasons I married my husband is because I'd go to him with my list of, oh, I have to do all this and I'm going crazy. And he'd be like, just shed some of it. And I was like, shed? You mean you're allowed to not, just shed? He's like, yeah, just don't do some of it. And it's like, oh, you are the guy I need. So,
Some of the solutions are just that easy.
Just that
don't
easy,
overload
yes.
your plate. You don't
Yes.
have to do everything.
exactly. So the shifts that you can make don't have to be huge, but they have to be consistent. So we've done 3. We've done self-care, reflection, and capacity. The next one is community, which is about reconnecting.
Sure.
Looking for perspective, looking for people to connect with. If you have friends that you have lost touch with, because what happens when we have work goals or volunteer goals or home goals that are super important to us is we drop other stuff over the side, especially when it's mainly important to ourselves. We just drop it over the side because we are wonderful, dedicated human beings that want to get things done, right? But if you drop them permanently over the side, you lose yourself. So bringing your friends back into your life, bringing your church or your community involvements back into your life, reconnecting with your spouse, those can make a huge difference. So that's 4
is
or 5.
isolating yourself part of
Isolating
a
yourself
symptom
is
of burnout?
hugely a part of burnout. And feeling lonely but also overwhelmed and wanting to block people out is a protective. You do it because you're emotionally exhausted and because people are starting to really get to you, but it turns out to be, in the long run, the wrong answer. In the short run, you may need some distance, but in the long run, you absolutely need that connection. We do as humans. Yeah.
And I remember going through this, is that I was surrounded by people and I felt totally alone, that none of
Yes.
them mattered. They didn't exist. I felt totally alone in spite of being around coworkers, family, everything.
So a big piece of that is because we feel that we ought to be doing more, that we ought to be more competent or professional or just less upset than we
exactly
are.
how I felt.
Right,
Exactly.
right. And so if you feel like you're not allowed to talk about this and other people have no idea what you're going through, just having a conversation about those 3 areas of burnout and say, I just learned that these things happen when you get overwhelmed, and it's just a thing that happens to human beings, and it's happening to me, and I need to reconnect, and I need some time to get more sleep and to relax some. So your last piece out of my 5 is coping skills, and we call that rethink your reactions. And one skill within that is flip the script. So I can't do this anymore. If you can find a way to flip that in your head, after I get some rest, I bet I can do better on this. Or I can do a small piece of this if I break it down. Or I can get some help. How can you flip the script from a negative to a positive,
Right.
so that you can have a more problem-solving mindset?
Just think of things differently. Like,
Yes, rethink your reactions.
just take a breath, sit down. Wait a second. How can I turn this?
Right. And that's where connecting with other people can really help, because getting outside perspective from a spouse or a mentor can really help you make that shift.
I had a good friend that actually did that, as far as you don't have to do all of this, or even if you have a lot to do, just forget about everything else. What do you need to do? Just do one thing. Do the thing you have
Right.
to do right now. You don't have to do it all.
Right.
And when I got that, and it's something you have to train yourself to do. You just can't say, I'm going to do this. It took
It's true.
months. It's like working out. You practice it every day and you get better at it. Figured out what's a priority today. I don't have to worry about all this other junk. It'll wait till
for
tomorrow.
you.
It'll wait 2 days from now.
Good for you.
The world is not going to end.
Yes, yes.
And once I figured that out and trained myself, okay, it's not a big deal. Okay, fear, it was the worst thing. I had to overcome. What are you
Yes.
afraid of?
Yeah,
I'm afraid of fear. I'm afraid of feeling this, but
yeah.
it takes people to help. It does. You have to ask for help from other people. going through life alone does not work, does it?
It's really true. And your point about it takes some time. So even these very simple skills that we've listed today, they take some time to incorporate into your system. And if you're overwhelmed and exhausted, you don't even want to try all 5 of them at once. Pick one and build it into your life over time until you feel like, okay, that's there. And then pick one more. That will get you much more. It will get you farther than trying to do everything at once, which is what got us into the burnout situation to begin with.
Exactly. So your book is coming out soon.
Yeah.
Do you have a website that people could go to learn more about burnout and possible steps to help them?
So there's 2 ways that you can get more information about this. One is to go to burnout-solutions.com. And if you want information about the book specifically, go to the book on burnout-solutions.com. The other place is if you are a Facebook fan, we have a Facebook page and we publish tips and information pretty regularly on our Burnout Solutions Facebook page. And you can also reach me directly there. So if you have a question or a story to tell, that would be a wonderful way to connect.
Great.
All right.
Well, that's about it for this episode of Canfield Company. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to email me at robert@robertcanfield.com. You can also see previous shows at our website, robertcanfield.com. So you have that website so even I can remember it. robert@robertcanfield.com if you have questions, or you can watch previous shows at robert@robertcanfield.com. And I will put Beth Genly's website address on the credits as we roll this. Thanks again for coming on the show. This has been, I think you can be helping a lot of people who watch this. And I wish you best of luck with your book. And she's a fellow Toastmaster, so congratulations on being a fellow Toastmaster.
I just won a speech contest.
Absolutely. Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
And on behalf of Frank Martin, our director, and Mike Canty, our technical director, it's Rob Canfield saying, thanks for watching and have a great Canfield and Company day.